There's no satisfaction in anything. I'm not satisfied by anything. We had some great moments out there today, but there's more for us to do. And so, don't be a fool and not learn from your mistakes. Let's learn from them and be intentional about that and give your best and put your best foot forward to continue to progress and win.
Don't be a fool and don't learn from your mistakes. Is he that little shot at Sirianni?
I think there was a couple times where Jalen Hurts stopped himself short and said, "Yeah, let me say something else here."
Grayson's grades. Scott Grayson from Fox 29 and 97.3 ESPN.com. They're brought to you by GMS Law. Make the right call with 4 convenient locations to serve you online. GMSLaw.com. So that was the voice of Jalen Hurts, who had a very good game yesterday. We'll check out the grades and see where he got on the report card. But let's start really with where you sit, Scott. Now, this is listen. I my opinion would be, if I was just going off the straight way that game was coached yesterday, you would say he stood in the way of his team blowing that team out, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, as you see in the grades, I was not a fan of those decisions. And
no, you gave him a D.
I know a lot of people weren't.
You gave him a D. Now, so listen, I want to get your take on this. You're around the team. You've been up there a bunch. You've been around Nick. You've been around this organization. Because I'm trying to – it almost seems unconscionable, some of the decisions he made yesterday. But my question is, I mean, in those decisions, is he strictly going off of the analytics? And is that what the organization wants? Because analytically speaking, he pretty much did what the analytics say to do every time. The ball's on the 1-yard line, you go for 2. 4th down and 3, where the ball was, you don't kick that field goal, you go for it. And he did. So he's saying, I'm going to stay aggressive. And when it works, no one seems to have a problem and say, hey, great job, Nick. But when it doesn't work, he is getting a ton of heat today. So do you have any insight on that thought of, no, he's following the analytics, and that's what the organization wants him to do?
That's a good question, because the last part you said there, that's what the organization wants him to do. I don't know if that's the case or not, because I think a great coach takes all the tools that you have at your disposal, you mix them all up, you smush them together, and you spit out what you think you should do. But some of that has to be gut, I believe. I know what analytics say, and I understand if you're going from the 1-yard line to get 2 points, that analytics will tell you to do it every time. I get it. But when you're up by 22, the gut should say every point I put on the board is going to take their will away from wanting to play this game anymore and to believe that they have a chance to come back. So, up 22, I get that you want to be greedy and go get the 2, but what are the 2 points doing for you there? What are they doing for you there? Take the 1, and then you take the 1 again later. And if it's a 7-0 game, if it's, let's say it's 6-0 and you score to make it 12-0, yeah, I think everybody in that building would have said absolutely go for 2 and make it 14-0. But when you're up by 3 scores at that point, the name of the game is add points anywhere you can. And I would even argue that those field goals should have been kicked. I don't care what the analytics say there. Kick those field goals. And don't kick. I was not in favor of kicking the 1 to make it an 8-point game.
Right.
I was all about, listen, man, they have no timeouts left. Make them go 90 yards. They need a touchdown. Punt it. I didn't even want them to try to go for it on 4th down there. So there's a lot of this that but this is the new NFL, and I think this is partly what we have to get our heads wrapped around, is more coaches in the league today, I think, will do and would have done what Nick did than would not. And I just think that's a state of where the league is now.
Yeah, you wrote in the piece about Nick Sirianni over at 97.3 ESPN.com. You gave him a D. You said he made a lot of questionable decisions, and you understand that analytics indicate an opportunity to attempt a 2-point conversion from the 1-yard line. That's pretty much standard in the NFL now, right? If there's a penalty and the ball moves up to the 1, you go for it. And that's with teams. We saw this the other night. They kicked the extra point, and there was a penalty. They took the point off the board. They went for 2 and didn't get it in the game. This is almost standard across the league right now.
Yeah, and I think old school coaches, you're right. There's the one time they made the extra point, there was the penalty. So they took the point off the board, went for 2 and didn't get it, which there are many old school coaches who will say never, and this was their rules back then, never take points off the board. So, you take the points you've got and you keep building. And in that game especially, Mike, and this is where I say you got to factor in the gut. You got to have, this is where you could go into it, and I get it, right? The Nick Sirianni press conferences where he says, hey, we talk about this stuff during the week. But there is an element of it that has to be feel of the game. You can't predict what the game is going to feel like until you're in it. And that's where I say that the gut has to tell you that this is Jacksonville. They're missing some of their top receivers. They're going to have a hard time coming back unless we blow this. So let's just keep taking points when we can get them, because eventually we're going to get too far away from them and they just can't get there.
Right.
But they didn't do that. And that's where I think Sirianni's, this is not the first time where, Sirianni to me has missed the feel of the game. We talked about it earlier in the year. I forget which game it was, where it was a lot of field goals that they just didn't do and didn't kick. And in that game, field goals were almost as gold as touchdowns because neither team could score. And he missed the feel of that game. I think he missed the feel of this game. That's where I understand your sports science, your analytics gurus are going to say, go for 2 every time. Go for it on 4th down. Don't kick that field goal from the 22. But the feel of the game, to me, sitting there watching it, was telling me, take the points. They're behind by so much. And he's missing that feel of the game. And that's where I think the organization saw what Doug Peterson did with the aggressiveness. The Lions are constantly over-aggressive sometimes to the point where it cost them potentially the NFC Championship last
I'm glad
year.
you brought the Lions up, right, because right now everybody feels that they're the best team in the league. But you would almost make the argument that they would have managed the game yesterday pretty much the same way.
Absolutely. I think Dan Campbell would have done exactly the same things. And that's where, but here's where another thing that bothered me. After the game, Nick Sirianni started out when he was asked about it, and I thought his answer, the first part of his answer was fine, but he gets so defensive sometimes that it you start not feeling sorry for him anymore about, like, if you would just go up and own that you did all that, the analytics say to do this, I would do it again every time. Because I trust my team. If you spin it that way, because there is an element of this that says, I trust you guys to do this. And I want you guys to be able to make these plays. I trust you to do them, and I trust our defense to stop them. But it gets to a point where it could get reckless. And then you start losing the locker room.
Are you talking about where he said, today it didn't work? That's the way it goes. That's the hat I have to wear. When we go get a 4th down and we convert a 4th down, nothing is really said. When we don't, right. I understand there will be questions. I have to have the stones to really, at the end of the day, say, am I doing everything I can do to help us win the game? And in those moments, I thought I was. I'll go back and look at him. That's the thing, is he says I'll go back and look at him. But I'm not sure that he's learning from being aggressive a couple games ago and it almost backfired on him. And that's why I wonder, is this like them saying, no, whatever that chart says, do it?
Yes, and I think, I don't think anything will change. I think if the same situation happens in Dallas next Sunday, he's going to do the same thing. And I look at Dallas and I see a team very similar to Jacksonville right now. You have a chance to put a knockout punch on these guys. Anytime you can put points on the board against them next week, you do it. And you put distance between you and them, and you just get to the finish line first. It's just, but he's not going to change. And I think we can talk about it all we want. We can complain about it. He's not going to change. This is who he is. This is what he is. And in that answer you read, the quote that you read, is there anything in there that tells you, he says, I'm going to look at it. No, you're not going to waste time looking at this, because in your mind, this is what you believe is right. He says, I'm going to do what I think is right for this football team. He thinks it is right. And I don't think the organization really minds. They like the aggressive nature.
If he thinks it's right and the organization doesn't, that's when you might have a disconnect. But I think the organization agrees with him. I think they say, keep being aggressive.
I do too. And that's where I think we can all sit here. And I think there's two separate parts to this. There's the 2-point conversions, 3 of them that they failed on, which you could sit there and you could pick at those. And the analytics every time are going to tell you to go for it from the 1-yard line. So that's fine. I can live with that. The field goals with the score the way it was, where the game was at those times, and the decision to kick them, as well as the one that I said that I would not have attempted, those to me are more troubling because I think those are more coaching based and less analytical. And you know, I have a problem with those more than I do the 2-point conversion attempts.
Yeah, the 4th and 3 one is, you know, I think they did a game. They played a game a couple weeks ago. I guess it was was it an ESPN game? Was it a Monday night game or whatever channel they were on? I'm pretty sure it was an ESPN game because Aikman, I'm pretty sure it was Aikman, and they had a graphic on the screen that says analytics say go. Okay, yeah, it was a Monday Night Football game, Josh is telling me. And the analytics said go. It was 4th down and 3 from almost the same spot. And I'm saying the analytics must be saying on 4th down and 3, instead of taking a field goal from here, that on 4th and 3, you should go for it because they have done this before.
Yeah, and you got it. Everything factors in the time of the game, right? What quarter you're in, where you're at, the score. Honestly, the players need to factor in too. Like, listen, Grant Calcaterra has done a great job. You didn't have Dallas Goedert. You know, Fred Johnson's done a nice job. You didn't have Jordan Mailata. You know, I can't remember if A.J. Brown was out at this point or not, but at some point in this game, you didn't even have him. Like, keep in mind what you have, what you don't have, and when you have a chance to put 3, like, I really believe Nick Sirianni looks at 3 points as a bad possession. I've started to believe that he sees that as a lost possession. I did not win that possession. And that's not the case, man. 3 points sometimes is a win. More often than not, it's a win. And I think some of the philosophy here, but again, like I said, you know, Dan Campbell, you know, I don't know if the Detroit media is like this with him, but he would absolutely do the same things. I think Sean McVay would do the same things. You know, I think it's just the way the NFL is these days, that they're willing to bypass those 3 points for the opportunity to keep a drive alive.
Yeah, you know, and it's just, listen, believe me, Sirianni getting hammered, people are not happy. I mean, we've had people walking up to us here at Fanatic Sportsbook. He blew the game yesterday. I said, they didn't even lose the game. I mean, like, they won the game. But the game was a lot closer than it should have been. And that's the frustrating part. And he's saying, if I'm aggressive, we blow them out, and the game's not close. But by not being aggressive, you made the game. I mean, it's almost like what comes first, the chicken or the egg here. You know,
right.
It's a catch-22.
It sure is. And I think, you know, because of all of that, I think one of the things that's lost in this that I'm really hoping to hear more about as the week goes on from the league, at least some clarification. The Saquon Barkley fumble that I think in the announcer, you know, even the rules guys on the broadcast said was not a fumble. That was if the Eagles lost that game. Yeah, we're sitting here, we're grilling Sirianni. Well, and I think
not only that,
so.
Not only that play. I mean, the 1-2 point conversion. It looked pretty clear that Jalen Hurts was in.
Right.
And then they say no, he wasn't in. But the fumble. I mean, that changes the dynamic of the whole game. And it's funny because Barkley has had. Well, Barkley's been amazing, obviously. But he's got 2 plays that almost have been the plays of the year, is the drop pass on 4th down. And if that fumble would have cost him yesterday, that would have been 2 key plays that he was a part of that have cost them.
Yes, and, you know, and that is something you have to keep an eye on. And but I looked at that when it happened, and you know, that was a turning point. I mean, it gave the Jaguars 14 points within 14 seconds, I believe they were apart. And we're grilling Sirianni, and that's fine. And I think it's rightfully so. I think that there's you know, that moment though kind of struck me as like, you know, if the Eagles went on to lose that game, I gotta believe they're up in arms with the league over what happened here and why did replay not correct it.
I don't know how they looked at that. And, I mean, how did he fall down? Like, what were they looking at? I mean, it was preposterous. But you're right. But then you mentioned A.J. Brown going out. I think that's another factor in the game is that, look, A.J.'s out. Our offense is sputtering. We have a chance to get a couple points here. Let's just take the points. That's where that's the thing about the analytics. Look, I get it. And the coach, by the way, is the deserving fall guy for the analytics. That's what your organization believes in, and he's the face of it. He gets the criticism. No problem with that. If you want to be mad at Sirianni today and say he cost this team and that this is the problem, I can understand people doing that. I'm just trying to get to the root of, this is something that goes on in the NFL a lot, and you see it. Like I was watching a game last night, same thing happened, 4th down and 3. The team went for it, and they ended up getting it. They got the first down, and it's like that's what these teams are doing now, and it is frustrating because, Dan Orlovsky said something that he's like, hey, this is the one playoff team where I can't trust the coach. And you wonder, is the organization feeling the same way?
I would love to know that myself. And when it comes down to it, I think analytics is, to me, like I said before, I think it's a tool in the tool bag. But I think a lot of these coaches look at these analytics and it's, no, this is the Bible. This is what we will follow. This will tell us everything to get us to the promised land, right? Mm-hmm. No. It's a tool. It should be a tool. And there are times, right, when you go to grab a tool and maybe that screwdriver is a little stripped, and even though that it should be the right head of the screwdriver, it's not going to turn the screw. You got to adapt. And I think these tools that these coaches have, sometimes they just fall right into it so that they can go to their GM or owner later and say, well, look, man, I used the analytics you guys gave me. They told me to go for it. I ran the best play I thought we had at the time. And what do you want me to do?
Yeah, I think if you want to question, and Nick doesn't call the plays on offense, but I think if you want to question some of the play calls that they chose to go with in those moments, especially the 4th down plays, the tush push. We were talking about this earlier, Scott. I don't know where you are on the tush push, but according to Jeff Kerr, who tweeted this out earlier. Last year, I think he said 88% of the time they converted it, and 82% this year. If you have a play that works 82% of the time, it's hard to argue with running that play.
That's why I was surprised they didn't run it a third time, right? I was surprised, by giving up on that the third time. Number one, you told your team, oh, they've figured this out. We're not going to be able to be successful with it. We're not going to do it anymore, right? You've told your team, we don't trust you guys to run it and get that point across. Yeah. As opposed to saying, you know what, congratulations, you stopped us twice. I dare you to stop us a third time. But in terms of the success of that play, you look at it, and for me, A.J. Brown is on that play. When he's not in the game, I looked at the lineup they had one time to run that, and the guys that were pushing were not. Your Dallas Goedert is in that play. He's not in there. Your A.J. Brown's on it. You're missing some of that muscle in the back of that push, and I think it's affecting the play.
All right, let's get a couple others. We have a poll up at Mike Gill Show. You can vote, and so far people are voting. What's the story of the win? 58% have Sirianni's decisions. I mean, you won a game, and the decision-making is what people think is the story of the game. Barkley leaping over the defender, that was the number 2. The Smith TD catch, number 3, and Dean's interception is number 4. But I almost look at Dean and that interception and put that into the big picture. Sirianni said something yesterday that stands out. He goes, you haven't asked me a question about our defense yet. You had the interception with Vaughn. You had the interception from Dean. You had a couple pressures, late, big pressures, Josh Sweat. So Vic Fangio's defense, you gave them a B. What did you think of Fangio? What stood out? Because they did allow Jacksonville to kind of creep back in this game. And especially on that, what was it, a fourth and 16 or something like that, or 12 or something.
Well, Avonte Maddox with the pass interference penalty was brutal. That was brutal. And but overall, Mike, this defense, I'm feeling more and more confident in, which is why I would punt instead of kick that field goal. That defense, if you take away that fumble recovery for a touchdown that they had off of Saquon, had only given up 16 points up to that point. And so make them go the distance. Trust your defense. On that play that Nakobe Dean picked off, if you go back and look at it, Brandon Graham deserves credit because he was not able to get to Trevor Lawrence, but he put his arms up, which forced Lawrence to throw it just a little bit higher. and that was offline, and Nakobe Dean had the chance to make the play. Now, Sirianni put his defense in that position of having to defend the end zone. Yeah, okay, Vic Fangio, Avonte Maddox with the bad penalty didn't help, but the team, the Jaguars did go down, but they started near midfield. That's a tough spot to put that defense in. That's been playing well. Show faith and confidence in your defense, punt that ball, and let them cover the way down the field and keep the Jaguars out of the end zone. I think they would have run out of time before they got down there. But that all being said, I like what Vic's doing with this defense. Bryce Huff got hurt evidently in warm-ups yesterday, so Josh Sweat saw more playing time. I think Sweat's starting to find a little bit more of comfort in this defense.
They're going to need
sacks
him
in the game.
They're going to need him too, by the way.
Yeah. Well, so when you look at it, Mike, I mean, we're getting close. We're entering trade deadline time. I believe Howie's going to make a move, and I could see edge rusher being one of the places he goes. One of the guys who's out there you can go after is Myles Garrett. It wouldn't be a bad one to get. And I look at this. If this defense needs a little bit of help, I know they were getting all those sacks. You just need a threat on the outside, a little bit more of a consistent threat on the outside to rush. Because I like the way the linebackers are playing. I really like the way these young guys are playing in the secondary. Love watching Cooper DeJean, frankly. I think the Eagles found some things here for the future that are playing really well ahead of the curve, if you will. And I think Nakobe Dean, I like the way Nakobe Dean and Zach Bond play together at linebacker. I think they're getting more comfortable with Fangio's defense. The complexity of it really seems like it's starting to really come together, and these guys are playing it better. And I just think, I think there's real potential for this defense to really help win some games like they did yesterday.
All right, Scott Grayson's grades. The full report card is up over at 973ESPN.com. You can check out all the grades over there. A D for Nick Sirianni. They win yesterday. By the way, Sirianni goes to 40-19 in his career. That is the second best win percentage in the NFL. And, of course, the Eagles go to 6-2. They'll play Dallas. It looks like Dallas is going to lose Dak Prescott, but it might get Micah Parsons back for the game on Sunday. All right, Scott Grayson's grades are back next week after the Eagles-Cowboys game, and you can check him out at 973ESPN.com, and you can check Scott out over at Fox 29. Thanks, Scott.
All right, no problem, Mike. Thank you.